Mr. Wilson, it is my purpose in this interview to explore your views on the common market. However, I think one cannot ask about the common market referendum without, in a sense, also asking something about the economy. To ask whether, in the serious situation which it is generally admitted we are in, whether at a time when people fear that things are going to get worse rather than better, the whole common market referendum is not a diversion, and an unnecessary diversion at that.
I don't agree at all. Britain was taken into the common market by our predecessors after they had pledged they would not do so without the full-hearted consent of the British people, and that consent was manifestly neither forthcoming nor even sought. And there was great unhappiness about it. I do not think that people felt themselves at that time committed to the market. We felt the terms were grossly inadequate. Many vital interests had been given away. We said we would renegotiate, and at the end of that process we would ask the British people to decide. And what it means is this, that if the people, the sovereign people themselves, decide in favour of remaining in the market, then the whole nation is committed. And I believe you will find a much greater acceptance, even by those who have opposed entry into the market, a greater acceptance of our position, and a much more wholehearted economic effort, management, salesmen, trade unions, than you could ever have had on the basis of a divided approach to entry.
Do you not feel, however, that some of the uncertainty that exists in Europe, in the banking places of the world, in the money places of the world, about Britain's future, is caused by the uncertainty waiting for the referendum?
No, I don't think that is really true. I think there are some people who expect Britain will vote and who are not certain, who are waiting before they come to final decisions about trading with us, or, as you say, financial commitments one way and another. But I believe that the outcome will be, when we look back on all this, a month from now, will be a much more committed Britain if the people accept the advice of the government and vote to stay in.
Before moving away from the economy, may I put to you, Prime Minister, that there is a very difficult line for a Prime Minister in the current climate between exuding calmness and complacency. Do you worry at all that in fact you have exuded complacency rather than calmness?
I haven't. I don't worry that. I don't worry about what people say about me. If I'd gone into a broadcast last week looking grim, they would have said that and said the situation must be much worse than he says. If I smile at all, then it's complacency. Look, I don't mind what people say. I know what the problems are. I know how we are tackling them with determination. And through 2 elections last year, I said that the economic problems we were facing were the gravest since 1931. They are, but I've also said, and it's not complacent, that, for example, on our trade figures, which are vital to the whole question of balance of payments in the pound, have immeasurably increased. In the last quarter of last year, excluding oil from it, oil had hardly happened, last quarter, of 1973, excluding oil, we were about £900 million in the red on our balance of trade, visible and invisible. Now we're something like 1,500 million in the black on the last 3 months of this year. Now that's an achievement. I'd only like to see some people trumpet it to the markets of the world a bit more than they do. But I want to say this about the market, the common market. And that is that although I believe it will be very much harder to solve our economic problems outside in the situation in which we now are, we shall not solve our problems just by staying in the market. We shall not solve them certainly by pulling out. That will make them harder. We shall solve them by our own efforts, our own work, our own productivity, our own costs, and everything we do in exports. That's why, while the market argument is a very important one, it doesn't absolve us as British people from putting our own affairs right.
Could you spell out to the people, though, just how much harder our economic task would be if we pulled out of the market?
Yes. Now, remember, I have never been an emotional European. I don't stand on the south coast, look towards the continent and say there's the New Jerusalem. I've never said that. I am, and I am emotional, I am an emotional Commonwealth man. It mattered a great deal to me when spontaneously the 33 heads of government of the Commonwealth said it matters to them that we stay in the market, and to some it matters very, very much indeed. You see, we criticised the terms. The Commonwealth were told to go and get lost and sell their New Zealand butter or cane sugar or whatever it might be somewhere else. We paid a very heavy price, for example, in buying sugar at scarcity prices because of those terms. Nevertheless, they have found other markets. What we have done now is to reopen some of our markets to New Zealand, to the Commonwealth sugar producers and to others, and we've helped a great deal, and Europe has helped a great deal with some of the developing countries. But certainly, if we had to look for fresh markets now, it would be very difficult indeed, because so much has changed in the last 3 years.
Well, I mean, I remember Mr. Callaghan saying to me on another television programme of ours that it would be a traumatic experience if we were to come out of the market. Would it be a traumatic experience?
It would certainly be a traumatic experience, because a lot has happened in those 3 years. Many people I know who were against going into the market then say, well, we're in now, we've had 3 years there, the whole world market position has changed and other people are getting the goods we might have had. At the same time, Europe have made many changes to help Britain, especially during the renegotiations. And therefore, it would certainly be difficult to try and reconstitute our own trading patterns. For example, with EFTA. EFTA themselves, we were members of EFTA, of course. EFTA themselves have had to negotiate an agreement with the common market from outside, and they've been forced to accept all the restrictions on their freedom, their industrial and trading freedom that you have if you're a member of the market. But unlike those who are in the market, they can't make changes. We have made changes by being in.
Would it be fair then to say, Prime Minister, that you are not in fact an enthusiastic marketeer, but you are a pragmatic marketeer?
It's a practical approach. Yes, I think it is in Britain's interest and the Commonwealth's interest, and they said this for themselves, and I think the interest of the wider world. One thing that's happened in the 3 years, and particularly during the period of renegotiations, having in the market a troublesome country like Britain that likes to look outwards, to across the Atlantic and to the wider world and to the Commonwealth, they're getting more outward looking as a result of our being there and our sort of banging the overseas drum a bit for them. I'm just not, as I say, I do not believe that membership of the common market solves all our problems by some magic wand. And while I welcome closer political relations with them, that is something which is happening all the time. And therefore, I have said all along, and my party said all along, we're neither in favour of being in Europe on principle or being out of the common market on principle. It depends on the terms and how the market itself develops. Now, I believe not only has the market changed very, very much, national interest now, we can urge and fight for national interests and get them more than would have been possible a few years ago. But remember, in the 3 years change of which I've spoken, the world has faced the cataclysmic effects of the oil crisis, the energy crisis, the commodities crisis, and therefore we're living in a totally different world from 3 years ago.
But you, Prime Minister, have got enough economic problems on your plate, as it were, without wishing any more that the no vote would bring. Why are you not out on the referendum hustings, really saying to the people, look, I need your yes vote, saying it as often and as many times as you possibly can?
You can certainly say, and I agree with you can say it again, that it would make our problems immeasurably more difficult if we got a no vote. James Callaghan and I are not going on any platforms of campaign groups. We are speaking to our own people. I believe we shall influence far more votes by that. I have already made a number of speeches quite early in the campaign. I've been abroad for a fortnight, of course, at the Commonwealth Conference, and I've got a very intensive programme from now to the day of the vote in different parts of the country saying that.
I do worry about, it does seem to me, I look at your speeches, there is this rather slight, we're recommending it, but nevertheless it's not quite that so important. Take it or leave it a bit,
No, there's none of that. We are recommending it, and in strong terms. I have concluded that it is vitally in British interests, and as I say, the world interests and the Commonwealth interests, that the vote should be for Britain to remain. If I have qualified it, it's not in the way you have said, but what I've just said to you now, that this does not mean, stay in or pull out, that our economic problems will be solved by such a decision. Our economic problems have got to be solved by ourselves. But I do agree with what you put in your question, that it will be easier and more helpful to solve those problems if we are in the market, and if we're in beyond all doubt and the whole country is now accepting it, than if we were to be out of the market. That is something I feel very strongly indeed. You're quite right about that.
Is your decision to maintain something of a low profile in the debate born of your responsibilities as a Prime Minister, or born of your responsibilities to maintain unity within the Labour Party?
Neither. It is because I believe our people are going to get a bit fed up with all the screaming and cacophony from both the campaigning sides, to the point where they're just going to put the fingers in their ears to get a bit of peace.
Yes, I think they may be also getting confused.
No, well, the more they get confused by people claiming that this is an invention of the devil, or it is an invention of the Almighty, the more they will listen, I think, to the calm voice of reason. That's how Jim Callan is approaching it. And I myself, we are both saying, look, we've been into this, give them our reasons. More people, I think, will listen to that approach than to the cacophony. But if you say I'm not being seen enough or heard enough, you better address that question to the broadcasting authorities. To think that in a 6-week campaign of vital importance to this country, I am given one programme on independent television, one programme on the BBC. That's not by my seeking, it's by some mysterious concept of balance which people with more ingenious minds than I have worked it out. So if they want me to speak to more people, they'd better wheel the cameras in again, hadn't they?
The question of balance is one I'd love to discuss with you at a future date, Prime Minister. At the moment, can we do some of the things that have been said?
But please don't criticise me that I'm not on television more.
Okay. Do you agree with Mr. Roy Jenkins, who described the debate as a conflict between extremists and moderates?
I think to some extent it's a conflict between committed people, people who wanted to be in the market even if they had to have the left foot cut off.
Extremists on both sides?
Yes, I think a lot of people made up their minds many years ago, I've said once, almost at birth, or prenatal influences. And I think many of our people, more of our people, are neither wholehearted Europeans or wholehearted anti-Europeans. Most of our people, I think, want to see what is in it for them. I don't mean in a vulgar material sense. What it means for the future of their children, what it means for Britain, what it means for the things we believe in abroad. I therefore don't regard it as extremists versus moderates. No, I would regard it, as I say, some people passionately committed to Europe at any price, some committed to pulling out even if we were given £1 million to every household in the country. Others who take my view, let us judge what is best for ourselves, our children, and our country.
Do you dislike the kind of language used by Mr. Prentice the other day when he said, with one or two honourable exceptions, those opponents of the markets belong to the way-out factions, the Tribune Group, a way-out faction, the Communist Party, the Powellites, and the National Front?